Welcome to the Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosella. Now, here are Bill and Callie.
Welcome to the Bill and Kelly Show. This is Bill Moran. Unfortunately, Kelly Rosella isn't with us today, and we're going to be sharing some more information about that. She had gotten a part in a play, and she's working on some things to do with that. And actually, she will not be in our show tonight either. But Michael Puentes of WBEZ has graciously agreed to fill in for tonight. From Wild Rose Brewery. So again, I'm on my own. So you folks are going to wonder how I'm going to crash and burn and have a train wreck. Get over it. It will probably happen, but it'll all be good, and Kelly will be out there laughing at me. So with all ado, I want to welcome some of our guests here today. They're from the Lighthouse in Hammond, but also the Tri-County area. Is that correct?
Yes.
With us today, we have Beth Synder, who is the executive director of the Lighthouse in the Tri-County area. Then the director, Leslie McCormick. And we do have a resident here, and I'm going to let her, if she feels comfortable telling her first name or not.
It's Debbie.
Debbie. Welcome to the show, ladies. We're so honored to have you here and tell your story about how the Lighthouse began and your different roles in the Lighthouse. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Beth, and if you'll just let us know about a little bit about yourself, where you're from,
Thank you.
And how the Lighthouse came to be.
Thank you. Well, I know 32 years ago when I was 25, if you had told me at that time that I would find myself in long-term recovery and running a corporation for recovery, people in recovery, I would have laughed at you because I was a daily pot smoker at that time in my life and cocaine and drinking every day, and I was spinning out. But anyway, I grew up with an alcoholic mom, and she was kind of a high-functioning Betty Ford type alcoholic. Her name's Sandy. She's deceased now. But it was actually through an intervention we did on my mother after I had been sober for 6 or 7 years that she came into recovery and lived in Monticello at the time with my father. And he stopped drinking also the day that she came home from the intervention. And when she was about 62 years old and 12 years sober, living in Monticello, she was kind of complaining about things, and I listened to her whine for about a year, and I finally said to her, you have way too much time on your hands. You're going to the Red Hat Ladies, you're playing bridge. What are you doing with your life, How are we helping the suffering young addicts and alcoholics that are in this rural area in Indiana? And I grew up down there, and so that got her wheels spinning. And then the very next day she started looking for recovery homes, and by 2008 we opened up our first home, and 2 or 3 years after that we opened up our first ladies' house. And within 5 years we transported everything to the Lafayette area and bought our first building. We had rented previously and had one big campus. It's a 10,000 square foot cinder block Baptist church that we acquired from another recovery home. And so we just were able to move right in, and it was sufficient for us, and we are still there. And then probably about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I met Leslie, and we got to swapping notes about recovery homes, and she had been wanting to open one, and I'll let her tell tell the Hammond story more. But I said, well, geez, it seems like we should partner and open up a ladies' house in Hammond. And so we looked for about a year and finally found the location we have now on Baltimore Street. And we just celebrated a year being there. And we actually have another men's location in Lafayette, and it's a what we call a sober living house or a 3/4 house. And that's once, the men have, got about 6 months to a year sobriety and they're ready to step out. So we're very happy to have that. And we also have a female 3/4 house as well, where we have a resident with 2 years sober and one with 1 year sober and one with 6 months sober. So I'm a firm believer in sober living and stair-stepping and making that transition from, the streets or jail or detox into, a tax-paying, community person that's productive, like myself. So you want to tell your little bit of your story about how you got inspired to get into the resident sober living house in Lake County?
And this is Leslie McCormick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Leslie.
Hi. Well, I had found myself in a little bit of trouble, and that's why I came into recovery. And unfortunately, I was one of those people that got to go to prison, and never thought I'd be there. But when I got out of prison, and I was in Kimbrough work release, I was with a lot of women who were just like me. They were mothers, they were daughters, wives, and they were telling me that, I was so lucky because I had a place to go home to. And they didn't have any place to go when they left there. They couldn't, if they went back home, there was a lot of drug use there, or there was abuse. Mm-hmm. And there was no place to go, and there was a waiting list for the ladies' home in Valpo. And I kept saying, well, there really should be some place for women in Lake County. There should be. Somebody should do something about that. And I talked about it for quite a while, and people kept saying, well, you need to do something, you need to do something. And I tried doing something, and it didn't work out. And Beth had come into where I worked and said, I have a recovery home, let's talk. Let's see if we can't get into cahoots. And I was like, no, that's okay. My ego and pride was all about, I'm going to do it by myself. And so I did that, and it wasn't working out too well. And so I went back and I called Beth, and I said, you know what, let's talk a little bit, because it was getting to be a lot harder than I thought. And so she came and she was showing me the ins and outs of Recovery Home. And I was starting to back out of it. I really was not too sure that I was going to be cut out for this. And she kept saying, no, you can do this, you can do this. And so that's why we are here today. But she really set me out there. She said, find the building, raise the money, and we'll go from there. And I was really apprehensive, because as much as I wanted to do it, as much as I felt that there was a need for it, I didn't think I was the one that was going to be able to do it. This is so out of my wheelhouse. But I do have a love for the recovering person because of my history in recovery. My husband's in recovery. My daughter's in recovery. I, too, come from I'm a child of an alcoholic. And, just the devastation that it causes in the family. And everybody tells us, well, you got to get sober, you got to get clean. And then they don't tell you what to do after that. It's like, now what? Now what do you do? And so, the Hammond House has been open for a year now. And it was rough going at first. I never thought we were going to get enough people to fill it, and now it's kind of taken over a life of its own. We got a really good group of women in there, and like she said, we're looking for a bigger house. So
you've already outgrown it over a year.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, it's a good place to be, but bad place to be if you get the statement. So the interesting thing is now, and you're looking at how do you find your funding? What type of mechanisms do you have? I know you have the New Year's party, which Kelly and I really wanted to go to, but we had another commitment. And then you also have something in June. I mean, these help pay for the housing and the some of the supplies, I suppose, in the house?
It gives us a good buffer. It gives us a little bit of breathing room, because we get a lot of women that come in that don't have any funds, and not to want to tell them no. And so it gives us operating funds for about, 3 or 4 months. And that's usually a good buffer for a woman coming in and telling them, first they have to get comfortable, and it usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to even find their niche in the house. And then they have to think about, got to find a job. And a lot of us, me included, really was not a steady worker. So trying to figure out what I want to do and how I'm going to go make legal money, that's difficult. So yeah, those fundraisers are a little bit of a breathing gift, so that we don't have to be on top of them. And okay, hey, welcome home. Now go find a job right away. You know.
And then there's the challenge, because so many addicts turn to crime, or so many illegal substances. They get in trouble for possession or and acquire felonies, and then so many companies. That's right on every application. Are you a felon? And in Lafayette, we've been able to acquire 21 partnerships with local companies that do hire felons, and we're starting to develop that, find our little circle in our community here for Lake County and Porter County. But that's part of that whole stigma that if you've gone to prison or you've committed a crime and got a felony, that you may not be a good worker, and that's just not that's not my experience at all. So
and also the felon can't get food stamps.
Yes.
So now you come in and you don't have any funds, plus you don't have any food, you don't have any money for food. And so that puts another burden on the house.
Yeah.
But I've heard from the city that they have since changed that, and that felons will soon be able to get food stamps. So that'll be helpful.
Let me go back to, before we begin a detailed discussion about recovery, and talk about the house again. And so at what point does a person seek housing in one of the houses? At what point do they have they had to go through recovery already? Do you provide recovery services?
I can answer
what point?
That. We take people that have detoxed. Either they've done it in jail, or they've done it in an emergency room, or they've done it in a treatment center, or in a basement, on the street. But we take them in that they've been detoxed. And then once we take them in, depending on where they come from, most addicts and alcoholics have burned every bridge. And many of the ones that seek residential housing, such as our place, is because they don't have anywhere else to go but the streets. But I am very thorough about all the screening. So we have about 25% of our clients that actually come from jail and are probably court-ordered. And then we also have, I would say, 25% that are referred by the recovering community itself. I get a lot of calls and a lot of people on Facebook that, I have a cousin, or I have a loved one, or I have a friend, that is seeking treatment. So we get a lot of referrals from just people in community, in recovery. Then I've worked with, obviously, all the treatment centers, and I'm familiar with all of the detoxes within our state region. And so we get quite a few, 25% of our referrals come from treatment. And then we actually get 25% from interventions, because I have many friends nationally that do interventions, and so we've acquired quite a few doing that as well. So we don't just have one category of residents. Some facilities are primarily just from jail or just from a treatment, but we have a variety, and all ages and all substances. And like I said, I kind of pre-screen them to see if they're going to be a good fit for us and we're a good fit for them.
Right. So the number one thing is you have to find out that they have gone through detox, and
Yes.
you have a methodology for doing that.
Yes.
So once you're there, what type of services are at the house? What can one expect? Meals provided? What type of services? Psychological? Like social work services or that type of thing?
Well, on the men's campus, we do things a little different than Leslie does at our her facility right now. Home has 7 beds, and our male facility down in Lafayette, the main campus, has 32 beds. So the way we operate with the men on a larger campus and the way we do here with the ladies is a little bit different. But in both instances, one of the things I want to stress is that we are very much a hands-on facility. In other words, we don't just let people come and they can just sign out and be gone all day, and we don't know who they're with or where they're going, or they're not allowed to do any of that. So we keep a leash on our residents, which isn't always the case with other sober living houses. And I felt strong about that because so many, you're coming to our facility for structure. Right. And, we want to provide that structure. So they have extreme accountability and limitations, especially in the first 30 days. They don't have a phone. We lock up their phone at night. And we stair step as they grow in their foundation of their recovery. That's when we kind of let them branch out more to go to more outside meetings where they can have a phone, acquire a car down the road, and more overnight passes or longer weekends, that kind of stuff. So we definitely have a method that it's certainly not just. They're just not coming and flopping. Right. There's a lot of structure.
But so you're providing a safe point for them to put a foot on, and so that they can continue on with the recovery and feel safe about it. And you're someone overlooking, a peer maybe that overlooks them and make sure that
and the way I look at it, especially at the ladies' house, because it is such a small group, it is about learning how to live life, how to live in a regular house. It's not, I don't want people to think that it's institutionalized because, we've been in institutions. We know that it's very structured, right? When you go to the bathroom, when you go to eat, when you got to wake up. This is, a home. And you have to mop the floor, and you have to make dinner, and you have to wash your clothes, and you have to get along with the people in the house with you.
You have to make
your
community.
Bed.
Yes, and it's in a smaller scale, and sometimes girls will come in and say, well, oh my God, I can't stand these women. There's only 6 other women. You can't stand 6 other women. You're going to have a heck of a time out there with how many other thousands of women.
But you women are brutal.
We are.
You are absolutely.
Very, very
believe me,
difficult.
I've got the scars to prove it. Psychologically and physically. But.
And there was a gentleman that has Serenity House. At one time when I was thinking of opening a women's, he goes, good luck to you. Women are horrible.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have 32 men in one place and 7 in another, and the ones with the 7 keep me double busy than the ones with 32.
Yeah, the 7 women are enough for 32 men.
I had 2 sisters. And I will tell you, as we're getting close to Easter time, I still have a fear of the Easter Bunny, thanks to my 2 sisters.
Okay.
So, yeah, you guys are mean.
So length of time, we recommend, our program is a 9-month program, and I took some time before I actually kind of came to that sweet spot when people ask, well, how long is your program? Now, we do varieties of depending on people's situation, but that's the recommended amount of time that we do. They can stay longer, and we encourage them to stay longer, but that way you kind of know that you've got a beginning and an end, that there is an actual program to complete. Our education, I started sober school about 25 years ago here in Valpo. when I was just within the recovering community. And I also worked in a couple of the local halfway houses here in town. So, I'm a firm believer in recovery hours. Not just, recovering meetings, but that includes education, that includes, videos, that includes study and time with your mentors, time with sponsors. So the average resident at Lighthouse puts in about 200 recovery hours just in their first 6 weeks. So we're pretty intense. It's mandatory that they're spending 2.5 hours per day, even when they work a full-time job, in those first 90 days especially, that they are putting that recovery time in. Because so many addicts, if you ask them, well, how long did you spend doing your 24/7? Everyone asks, how much time did you do? So putting recovery time in is very crucial to recovery.
And I think that's what I've heard repeatedly. People have been on the show, is that one thing that they appreciated about during the recovery is the structure that they didn't have when they're offending for themselves. So it sounds brutal, and it may be brutal at the time, but that I think that, when I've heard at least, that structure is really appreciated and gives them a way of keeping their mind focused and active. Well,
I say to the families or the people applying for the Lighthouse, if you are ready for a change and you are committed to recovery, you are going to love the Lighthouse.
Right.
If you are not ready
sure.
for a change, you're going to hate it, okay? Because we are completely, just completely saturated with the 12 steps, with faith, with MRT, moral recognition therapy, with cognitive behavior, practices and life skills. And one of the things you asked is, we don't offer any medical or clinical services on our campus, but we do certainly encourage each resident to go get a therapist, go get dentist appointment, go to the doctor. So many of those things have been neglected. So we don't actually provide those services, but we hold their hand, you might say, and really encourage each one to take care of business, so to speak.
But what I understand then is what you do provide is the educational and
Yes.
activities just to keep them busy,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
so important. And it's
Yes.
not to keep them busy, but for a purpose.
Well, we have Miss Debbie here, who
Yeah,
is
in fact,
currently a
she's
resident.
been very quiet. It's
Yes.
just-
I am
So what do you think about the Lighthouse? What has it been helping you as far as getting started with your recovery?
The structure helps me stay sober. If you want to be sober, you need that structure. You need to learn how to be sober and clean. As far as the Lighthouse, it's teaching me helping me live life sober and not in jail.
Right.
I had to first learn how to live life not being in jail, and that helped with that. Now I have to learn how to live my life on a continuous basis, clean and sober. And that's where the Lighthouse
And how to
comes in.
participate in a recovery community. Now, not everybody, there's multiple pathways to recovery, and I'm a national recovery coach myself. So I believe in the multiple pathways that, the 12 steps is one way, secular is another way, faith is another way. So what works for one person works for another. And that's one of the reasons we're a 3-arm facility. So wherever you fall into, you're going to be able to find your recovery with us. But I would say we are primarily 12-step based. And the reason that's the most successful pathway there's ever been in the history. So it trumps every other recovery path out there. And so with that being in mind is, you have to change your people, places, and things. Everybody says that across the board.
Right.
And it is very awkward to step into a new world of friends and acquaintances and even work, employment, where it's in a recovery community, because a recovery community is just like any other culture, whether you're in the biker world or the religious world or the needlepoint world. Every group, and we have our own culture, this recovery community, and you have to plug in and get plugged in, because nobody stays sober by themselves. So very, very few people, and if they do, they've probably switched addictions. They're working 90 hours a week, or they're in some other kind of obsessive compulsive behavior that
and
they.
I think you almost touch on that, finding balance.
Yes.
How do I go from not doing anything to not doing too much?
Right.
Because we have a tendency to do that. We
Yeah.
we quit drinking and drugging, and all of a sudden we're working 90 hours a
Yeah.
week, and
That's
now we
right.
forget to go to meetings, and now we're going to be drinking again. And so for the house, one thing I've learned, because it's a learning experience for me, she's been doing it forever, I've just, for this year, is that the girls will come in, they'll come in with nothing. And then all of a sudden you go into their room and they're hoarding clothes and they're hoarding shoes. And it's like, oh my God, you've gone from people that are homeless and have nothing to, I have to tell you to start, hey, you got to taper down. You need to get rid of some of the stuff.
So there's a little bit of OCD that comes along with the,
Yeah.
okay, it's a kind of a, because there's what I keep on hearing is this missing hole that people try to fill.
it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they do that with an OCD behavior, clothes, whatever it is. And so.
I mean, we have residents, right, that they'll come in. We've had girls that have come in at a certain size, and then all of a sudden it's like, I need bigger pants. And we're very grateful for donations of clothes that come in,
yes,
because
donations help.
their weight fluctuates when they come out of jail. Or they've come off the streets. There's one that has to lose weight. There's one that has to gain weight. It's they're all different, and they come in there with that same mentality, is that I don't have anything, and there's comfort in getting something.
Yeah.
So they get blankets, they get pillows, and then they start getting clothes, and then they start getting stuffed animals, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, whoa, your room looks like 20 people live in it, not just 2. So, yeah.
And the other important fact is they get friends, the peers. That is the key process.
Even if they don't want them at first.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't want
Yes.
But,
And that brings me to our organization is not federally funded. We don't accept any state funding currently. So all of our operations has either been through service fees being paid, and we're very frugal with our budgets. That of what determines our budget is the bed size, and if we can't have a certain amount of beds and pay for it, we don't open the house. So, but we've started what we call a beacon sponsorship, and what that does is that allows outside people to make donations, which they can go right to our website and put on the donate button, and our service fees for 1 week is $160, and right now we have 2 ladies and 1 gentleman that are all facing surgery. And Debbie gave me permission to talk a minute about her situation. She's recently been diagnosed with breast cancer, and so she's going to be unable to work. She doesn't have any local family support or financial aid, and we don't want to kick her to the curb just because she's going to be out of work. We want to help her through this. So I'm specifically asking for a Beacon sponsorship donation in Debbie's name so that we can help her through her treatment. She's facing surgery, and we want to be able to help her. Now, I know we can't maybe help everybody, but we can certainly help this one lady. And we have another lady that is facing surgery as well. And I have a gentleman. So I'm asking that we get some support from community, not only financially, but we need support to do your part to help us break the stigma of addiction, because every addict, you got to remember, is somebody's daughter, somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's brother, okay, somebody's parent. And every time we try to go and open a house in some community, it is lots of times an uproar that people think it's a good idea to open up sober living, but I don't want it, in my backyard, because I'm scared of, crime and bad people and hoodlums and,
Right.
and people, child molesters, and people have this image of what an addict and an alcoholic is. And I'm here to tell you that I'm an addict and an alcoholic, and I've never robbed anybody. I've never, I've never been arrested for anything, so not everybody is in that category. Okay. And we need help in the community opening up your mind about, recovery.
Beth, I do have to take care of one part of business, or I'm going to get in trouble here real quick. So with that, we're just going to take a bit of a station break here, and we'll be back within about a minute.
You doing okay?
You are listening to The Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosala. Now, here are your hosts, Bill and Callie.
Welcome back, and for those of you who missed Kelly's voice, you just had a little taste of it, so there you go. We miss you, Kelly. So with that, why don't we talk a little bit about, well, first of all, we would like to come back and talk about how we can help Debbie out a little bit more, and some other people that may need help. But let's talk about generically recovery, the whole process itself, and some of the obstacles and some of the resources that are out there. And I know what we maybe talk a bit more about your stories and where you came from and how that recovery is, and maybe and give witness to some of the recovery that's going on in the houses, and without mentioning names.
I thought Debbie could maybe share what's been some of the resources that you've been able to utilize, because you came from Southern Indiana, didn't you?
Yeah.
So she's completely relocated from 2 or 3 hours away up here. So she's had to utilize finding doctors,
Find all kinds of doctors.
Yes, and I think Leslie has been instrumental in
definitely.
We have a van. It may not be the best van, but it's paid for, one of them. And so we, unlike many other residential facilities that don't provide any transportation, we really go out of our way to help these residents on a personal basis. Even I do with the 30 men down there. If they have a job interview, if they need a pair of work boots, we don't just say, okay, you're on your own. We are very conscientious about trying to help each one personally. And our staff is very thin, so we're open to volunteers. People can direct, my email is on our website, and my phone number, so anybody that wants to call and ask, what some of our needs are, you guys can, call me. But one of the things we're excited about doing, which we forgot to talk about, the bottles. We are looking for organizations that would do a fundraiser for us using our Beacon sponsorship little bottles. It's where you take a little bottle that's got our address and stuff on it, and you take it home and you put your change in it, and then bring it back. We've got about 400 or 500 of the bottles, so we're looking for churches, we're looking for organizations that would be willing to maybe take our bottles into their community for a month to raise funds, and this particular one we're going to be doing over the next 90 days is specifically for Debbie. We're trying to raise funds. So if there's anybody out there, community or church, that would like us to come and make a presentation, I'd be happy to do that. So I wanted to get that little.
Yeah, and we'll definitely mention on our other shows as well.
Okay,
and
thank you.
We'll do that.
That's appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some other resources that I want to talk with Debbie off the air that
Okay.
we may have.
Yeah.
But gosh, my heart goes out to you, Debbie. It's first you have to deal with going through rehab and
Right.
getting clean and staying clean, and now this, and,
Right.
and you're on our minds.
I think that people, we take surgeries for granted. The average person, I got to go have surgery. There is some concern about it. But for the recovering community, surgery is scary. Not because of the surgery itself, but because of the painkillers they're going to give us afterwards. Right? Is it
Yeah.
going to trigger me? Is it going to cause me to go back out? And we get scared. And we
Very.
bring it up in meetings and we tell people, and they say, well, make sure somebody's holding your pills. And we're like, okay, but who's going to hold them? If everybody in my life is a recovering person, who do I ask? Who do I put in that position to hold my meds? And what is the anesthesia going to do to me? And what is the painkiller they give me in the hospital going to do to me? And so that is a big fear for us, is to go back out because of a surgery. And so a lot of people will put off surgery. They'll put off this very necessary thing because of the fear of relapse.
Yes.
And that's a big deal.
And that just is where each individual is in their recovery process. Me personally, I've had 4 major surgeries in my 32 years of recovery. I've never relapsed. And there's basic do's and don'ts, and that's what you wanted to talk about a little bit, the recovery process. There is a process. There definitely is a process. We can track, these basic cluster of symptoms, what you're like in the first 2 weeks, what happens in your first 30 days, what happens at a 6-month mark, what happens even at a 10-year mark or a 20-year mark. The things that I'm going through now in 30 years, my 30-year mark, is nothing like it was, in my first 6 months. But I still have a recovery process at the level that I have. And you want to hear something funny? I'm thinking, because I have a 87-year-old father that is maybe going to need retirement living at some point. Okay, so I started thinking about, well, geez, are there any retirement, sober living homes? There's those, sober cruises that you can go on. But hey, if I'm going to have to be in a retirement home, I want to be in a recovery retirement home. We've started with a recovery high school. We've got one in Indianapolis that I visited that's just very exciting. And there's a few in, the bigger cities, New York. But I'm even thinking, well, we're going to have to expand, so the recovery movement is alive and well. And I know we have a heroin epidemic that everybody is very concerned about, especially in Valpo and in this Northwest Indiana. Yes. But I also want you to remind you that alcohol is still the number one killer and of even young people. It's still the number one drug of the world, and
it's legal.
Right. Yes, and we can't minimize that. And but the momentum for our recovery movement is really picking up track, in space. We recently got a $50 million grant for Indiana to help felons get a second chance at recovery, which maybe I can come back and we can talk about that another time.
Definitely.
We're in the process of trying to apply for that, so there's some good news, but it's very challenging to, if you're penniless, you're homeless, you don't have any insurance, you're kind of, it's just, It's just trying to get any kind of help in Indiana is darn near impossible.
Yeah. Some of the things I keep on hearing about it's kind of like the whole process is evolving every time. In fact, if Kelly's listening, which she may or may not be, I don't know. If it's me doing the show, she's probably, that's not going to be entertaining. I'm not going to listen. No, I'm just kidding. Because listening to you ladies is by far informative. But a sober cruise. Kelly is a travel agent, and so yeah, in fact, that's one of the things I absolutely hated about going on a cruise ship. Well, number one, Kelly will tell you I picked the wrong cruise liner, but it's, you're on this boat and you are contained, and what is there to do? Eat and drink 24/7. There's always eating and drinking going on, and I'm like, okay, what else can there be? So that is something, someone that go out that loves going on cruises and being able to go out without having that temptation there is awesome. That's I've got to mention that to Kelly.
Yeah, that takes time though, getting to that level of, sobriety is being on a cruise, because the hardest part of having the recovery home is I take the girls to a lot of parties, retreats, retreats, conferences, and the first time you have to be surrounded by hundreds of people in sobriety, you're kind of, oh no, like, well, how do I behave and what do I do? And it's unnerving at times, because we're such loners when we're not drinking and drugging. And when I'm drinking and drugging, I'm very social, but nobody wants me around. And now I'm sober. How do I behave with these people?
Well, that brings up another interesting question is, because it's real life, because there are people that drink out there, and they're also going to stray into maybe former friends that are still doing drugs. Is that a part of recovery? Do you ever take them into environments that's to kind of build up that process to
No.
saying?
Not when they're living in the residential home.
So you purposely avoid that?
Yes.
All right.
And they're not allowed to work in locations where they serve alcohol. So I know not all recovery homes are like that. Some will allow you to work in a restaurant, for instance, that serves alcohol. Our board and our organization decided not to. They can work in a grocery store. I know there's alcohol that's there, but that's about the extent of it. But I do think there's a time and a place. I was able to go to Las Vegas, but I didn't do it till I was 20 years sober. I would have never tried to go to a Las Vegas trip maybe in my first 5 years. But so there's a time and a place for everything with, having your recovery become so much a part of you that you've got it wherever you go. Now I have complete freedom.
Well, I take the girls to Beatles Fest, downtown Hammond.
Okay.
And they have the big beer tent there, right? And so I can't afford, primo seats, so we can't sit way close. So we're kind of stuck by the beer tent. And what helps and what I've been taught in recovery is that we stick together. So I don't go by myself. I go with another recovering person, or 10 or 20 of them, and we find a spot, we camp out there, and we keep each other company. Yeah. And that's exactly, we are putting into practice what we're being taught in recovery. We stick together, we use our phone numbers, we go with another person, there's safety in numbers. And I can go anywhere I want as long as I'm spiritually fit and I've got somebody with me. And I haven't had, we had a really good time last year. I'm sure we'll go again this year. And we can have fun. We can have fun. It's everywhere. It's going to be everywhere. We can't hide out in a cave and get away from it. It's going to be out there. We learn to live with it.
That's a sign of recovery, that you have freedom from active addiction, not only physically, but also mentally, because if you're still walking around obsessing and thinking about drugs and alcohol, then eventually, you're going to find yourself picking up again. So actual true recovery what that is it relieves you from that physical compulsion and the obsession. And that's the miracle of recovery.
Right. And one of the things, too, is coming up with safe activities. And I know if you talk to people from Rain House, they'll tell you the Fluid Coffee House, awesome.
Yes.
I mean, it's one place where they have bands there, they have activities, art. They're
Yes.
Well, because Chuck Skates is an artist himself, it's always beautiful art, but mind-challenging art. And so they have a lot of activities, which, the first time they had an open mic there, I said, man, this is great. You'd see all these people having time, and guess where a lot of those people were from? Just down the road. I began talking to one of them, and they said, yeah, this is great having Fluid so close by, because you feel like you could party without having alcohol or anything, like that. So, there's those type of situations where, and I guess that's part of the recovery, learning how to have fun without alcohol or any other substance. So,
one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do we accept people that are currently on methadone or Suboxone? And I wanted to address that. The answer is no, not currently do we accept anybody that is on medically assisted treatment, which seems to be a big movement in Indiana. We've had 5 new Suboxone and methadone clinics open up just this year to help addicts, especially opioid addicts, get on their feet and get out of the active addiction with heroin and pills, and kind of switch to the less of the two evils. But I've had a lot of people ask me, well, what about sober living for people that are using that method, whether it's temporarily, for a few months, or if it's, for longer. And the answer to that is I'm open to that, because I do see the need that if you're on Suboxone, it's better than being dead. And, we have had over 800, deaths in the state of Indiana over the last couple years. So, anything that's going to keep an addict alive longer, I'm for. But
and the Vivitrol, that?
Now, Vivitrol, we do accept.
Okay.
And that helps with cravings, and it really is a very good, effective. Yes,
it's the receptor blocker, right?
Yes.
So that
if you were to use heroin,
you would not
feel the effects.
Yes,
so it kind of
that's right.
becomes
because
useless.
that's one thing that and Dave Reynolds, he's the best sheriff in the United States. It's one program that he has led the way on in Indiana and the United States, the Vivitrol program, court-ordered program where people are put on it and they're monitored to make sure how they're doing, but it gives them a chance to go out and experience life without danger of becoming relapsed again. So.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to touch on that, because I come from the world of abstinence. I've always believed in abstinence, total abstinence. I've never personally had any kind of drug replacement therapy myself, and so that's been my pathway. But after I became a recovery coach a couple years ago, and with the opioid epidemic and me having to go to over 20 funerals in the last 3 years of people under 30 years old in our Tri-County area, it's been breaking my heart that so many young people are dying, and it's forced us to open our mind to alternatives in every way. So I am, open-minded really for the first time that at some point down the road I may try to open up a house specifically for MAT clients, medically assisted treatment, that are on Suboxone and on methadone, because there's very, very, very few. I think we have 346 sober living homes in Indiana. And I'll bet you I can count on one hand the ones that support that. So I don't think it's an answer to everything, but I do think that there's a place for it. So,
yeah, and because with this explosion that we have, and it's starting to taper. I just read where numbers are starting to go down, although not by great numbers. The jails, the sheriffs, the cities are looking at a way of reducing overcrowding. And if they can put someone on a medically assisted means, and again, this isn't an automatic process. This is a court order process that is well thought of, and I've had the sheriff and the prosecutor and interviewed them both here in Porter County, and it's like a team effort. It's almost like a triage unit in a way, coming together with different doctors talking about what they're going to do. You have a judge, you have the prosecutor's office, you have the sheriff's office getting involved in each case,
Yes.
and they have to pass a litany test. Okay, does this person qualify? And so, getting off a little track here, but that is kind of refreshing in a way to know that that we're just not throwing solutions at it. It's being very well thought out by all parties. And
but the problem with that is that because most recovery communities are in fact based on abstinence, that these clients or these addicts are shunned.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a stigma we have as people in recovery, judging these people and not accepting them where they are. So that's we've been trying to address stigma, with people outside of the recovering community. But I know there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that is in recovery, and I'm here to say that, I've had a change of heart, and it's completely based on the suffering addict that is not living through a bottom anymore. Right. You used to be able to hit bottom, okay, and now
you're cushioning.
They're dying through the bottom. They're not living through. They're not hitting bottom. They're dying through a bottom. So we need to, even in the recovering community, be open-minded and not fall into this stigma ourselves about, what's recovery, the definition of recovery, and what's not. So that's something I just wanted to plug a little bit.
Yeah, and it all boils down to what things that have been talked about before, and to try to get people to understand that, yes, there was a poor decision made one time, but this is an actual disease, and getting people to realize we need to treat it and view it as that, and remove that stigmatism is a challenge. It's for me, sitting in a room with you, three lovely ladies, it's I would never have known, but that's something built up in my own mind that I admit that I'm still trying to get beyond that, but it's trying to understand that it hits everyone. And when our coroner here, he's now the treasurer, I forgot what office he holds now. Sorry, Chuck, if you're out there, Chuck Harris. But he went into schools all the time and said, no one is immune from this. Absolutely no one. I don't care if your parents are millionaires, if your dad's a doctor. In fact, that is where our highest instances are of drug overdose deaths. Right. And so just to get that mindset, and then to be prejudiced against people when they are struggling with a problem like that, it's one of the issues, and I think in our society we got to get beyond. And our society, unfortunately, has a hard time getting beyond a lot of things. You get frustrated at a point in time, but that is, probably before we close, probably that's something we could close on, is that stigmatism, and maybe in all your areas what you felt like, and being shunned, and because that's one thing that I always hear from people. The minute they feel less connected that's when their danger of relapse comes.
Yep. When
they feel like they're being isolated, they need something to, and I don't you three want to maybe chime in on that?
Well, the stigma, people have an idea as to what an alcoholic is. It's the person that lives under the bridge with the, paper bag, or the drug addict is the person that's strung out and hiding out in abandoned buildings. And yeah, that's where we can go. We can definitely get there. But that's not where we're automatically going to go all the time. And when they let us out of jail, I can only speak for myself, but when they let me out of prison and they let me out of work release, I had a family to go to. And I was really grateful for that. But, you know, the people that don't have that to go to, I still had to learn how to live life in recovery. Because my go-to, which is lying, cheating, and stealing, wasn't going to work anymore. And I understand their reactions because, you know, I deal with a recovering husband. And when he would tell me something, I'd always thought he was lying to me. I thought, oh, he's been drinking. I know he's been drinking. And I'm in recovery. You'd think I would be more patient, loving, and kind. And I even have a tendency to accuse him, oh, you've been drinking, or have you been doing this? And so I can imagine that the normal person has even more of a distrust of us, right? If you've seen us in action, I would see why you don't trust us. But to give us,
you shouldn't.
You know, you really shouldn't trust us unless we're in recovery, and that's why, you know, people in recovery dealing with newcomers in recovery is where it's at, you know, because we know that if your mouth is moving, you're lying. We get when you say you don't understand. Yes, we do understand. I hear that all the time. You don't understand. I do understand. I do. I'm a graduate of Rockville. I'm a graduate of Lake County Jail. I understand what you're talking about, but what you're giving me are excuses. You're not giving me the truth, and so it is kind of it's a hard thing to say to the regular society. Please take us in with open arms and trust us. When in reality, you know, we got to work towards that trust. We got to work towards that trust.
Yeah.
I'd like to address a minute the disease for just a second, because even in the recovering community, the word choice is used constantly, okay? And when it comes to the faith pathway to recovery and the spiritual pathway to recovery, so that's whether you're going through a religion or church or you're going through one of the 12 steps, one of the things those particular paths focus on is our powerlessness, that we don't in fact have the power of choice. And what is so challenging is that, you know, you've got 1 out of 10 drinkers that has the disease of addiction. And so you've got the majority of people that, you know, they are not powerless. They do have the power of choice. So for them to say, well, you just need to make better choices, and when you make better choices, you know, or you made one bad choice, like you mentioned, you know, then you're going to turn your life around. And you know what? That is their experience. That's what they know, because they have power over alcohol and they have power over drugs. And so we as addicts are conditioned with the majority that we should be doing better, that we should be exercising better judgment, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And when we can't, or we don't, okay, there is so much shame and even fury towards ourselves, okay, of, you know, being furious with ourselves that why can't I control this? Why can't I stop? Why can't I stay stopped? You know, what is it in me? Am I evil? Am I bad? And then when I walked in and discovered that, you know, what an alcoholic is, or what an addict really is, quite frankly, I was relieved, because I thought I was maybe either evil or crazy, you know, and to find out that I was neither, but that I had a disease, okay, that told me I don't have it. And all those 9 out of 10 drinkers also told me that I don't have it, you know, that I should be using power of choice to control my drinking. And that's what I wasn't doing right. Well, my story as an addict and an alcoholic is that that's what makes me different from those 9 out of 10 drinkers. Mm-hmm. That's the very thing, that I am powerless. And so recovery is developing a new power that's beyond me to do for me what I can't do. And that's kept me sober now 32 plus years.
Well, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing story. With that, we are going to have to wrap up the show. And we talked about this possibly being from 20 minutes to an hour. Well, we hit the hour. But this is a wealth of information, a wealth of... and you guys were not as nervous as... Leslie,
Yeah,
I think
we
you
are.
kind of eased up there. You were like...
Yeah, you're ready for the coffee in Highland.
I heard
You're
her,
ready for the coffee
I heard
show.
her hand shaking on the table, and then now all of a sudden she's like, chill. And Debbie, gosh, you're going to be on our minds.
Oh, thank you.
Wish you the best. And with that, I'd like to close out the show and thank Beth, Leslie, and Debbie for spending some time with us today. And
Our pleasure.
and
Thank
we're
you for
and,
letting us tell our stories and promoting the Lighthouse, because I used to sell phones, and now I tell people I'm selling sobriety.
well, and thank you for providing such a place like the Lighthouse. And with what we're going through in our society, it's definitely needed. It's a resource that we couldn't be without. So thank you for doing your work in Hammond and in Lafayette. Please keep at it. And if there's anything we can do, and by having you on the show next time. But with that, we would like to wish everyone a safe rest of the week and safe weekend. We're going to have a warm bump here for a bit, so enjoy that. And with that, we would like to wish you goodbye. Goodbye
Thank
for now.
you. Bye.
You have been listening to The Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. Broadcast live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosella. This show will be rebroadcast on Saturday at 6 p.m. on WVLP. The Bill and Callie Show podcast is available on iTunes and YouTube. Have a wonderful week. Bye for now.